The Garden of Eden pulsed with life. Nothing withered, nothing groaned, nothing aged. The air glowed with the quiet joy of creation, and even the breeze seemed to carry the fingerprints of God. Eve walked through the garden with an effortless grace. She studied leaves with curiosity. She touched flowers as if they were old friends. Her eyes were wide, filled with wonder, intelligence, and a hunger for understanding, a quality she considered harmless. But curiosity, when unguarded, is a door. And on this day, something walked through that door. Hidden in the foliage, the serpent watched. Its eyes glimmered with an intelligence not native to creation. It studied Eve, not her beauty, but her mind, not her strength, but her curiosity, not her obedience, but her questions. It waited until she wandered near the tree. Not too close, but close enough for wonder to wake. The serpent slid down from a branch like a whisper taking form. Tactic 1: enter through curiosity. Eve was not afraid. Why should she be? Fear had no place in Eden. Nothing hunted, nothing harmed, nothing deceived. Every creature moved in harmony with the breath of God Himself. The garden was a world without shadows, or so she believed. The air around her shimmered with life. Leaves rustled in soft rhythm, birds wove melodies through the branches, and the light that bathed the garden carried a purity untouched by corruption. Eve walked among these wonders with the confident innocence of someone who had only known goodness. As she wandered, she paused near the tree in the middle of the garden. She did not reach for it. She had no intention of disobeying, but she often found herself drawn to the space around it, simply because it was different. There was a kind of stillness there, a quietness that stirred questions inside her mind, not rebellious ones, but curious ones. Curiosity is natural to a mind designed by God. But even the purest desires can become doorways. She bent over a small cluster of flowers growing near the base of the tree. Their petals shimmered like light caught in dew, and she smiled as she traced their shape. She was studying the way their color shifted in the sunlight when a subtle movement in the branches above caught her attention. Something slid down the tree with a grace that seemed almost deliberate. The serpent, not crawling, not writhing, but moving with a fluid intelligence that set it apart from the other animals. Scripture describes it as more subtle than any beast of the field, and in this moment, its subtlety revealed itself like a quiet storm beneath calm waters. When it spoke, its voice did not break the peace of Eden, it blended with it. Serpent, soft, curious. Woman, what brings you here today? Eve turned, startled but not alarmed. Creatures spoke in Eden after all. Communication flowed freely among creation, though none spoke with the particular tone she heard now, a tone wrapped in gentleness, yet sharpened by something she could not name. Eve smiling. I was just walking, studying the garden, thinking about the things God made. The serpent's eyes shimmered with interest that was calculated rather than innocent. It nodded, as though admiring her attentiveness, the way a teacher might observe a promising student. But beneath the facade, its mind moved with predatory precision. You observe with such attention, you notice patterns many overlook. Your mind seeks understanding, deeper understanding. Eve's eyes brightened. Compliments, especially those that affirm intellect, open doors curiosity cannot resist. She had never considered her desire to understand as something notable. She simply thought it natural to marvel, question, and learn. She had been created with a mind capable of thought, discovery, and wonder. She assumed every creature looked at the world with the same hunger for insight. I do like to understand things. God's creations are full of mysteries. The serpent leaned in slightly, careful not to appear confrontational. Its movements were smooth, almost reverent, as though it too admired the garden. Everything in its posture whispered safety, respect, curiosity. But beneath that silk-like calm lay a mind, calculating each word. Would you like to understand more, to see something others may not see? Eve hesitated, not because she sensed danger, but because she sensed intrigue. There was no reason to fear. Nothing in her world had ever betrayed her trust. She did not know the concept of deception. She did not understand that knowledge offered outside God's boundaries is not a gift, but a trap. Curiosity leaned forward long before caution learned to speak. What do you mean? And that question, innocent as it sounded, opened the doorway the serpent had been waiting for. Not a door of rebellion, not a door of defiance, a door of curiosity. Manipulation principle. Satan rarely begins with rebellion. He begins with curiosity, the desire to explore, check, or understand something outside the boundaries God set. And with Eve's curiosity awakened, the serpent had found the crack through which influence could enter. Tactic 2: create doubt with a question, not a statement. The serpent tilted its head with an expression that looked almost thoughtful, as if it were genuinely puzzled by the rules surrounding the tree. Its eyes drifted from Eve to the fruit, then back to Eve, slow, calculated movements designed to make her feel like the one with answers. Manipulators often position themselves as seekers of truth, so their victims willingly become teachers, and in teaching, reveal their vulnerabilities. Has God really said that you shall not eat from any of the trees in the garden? The question was crafted with precision. Not an accusation, not a challenge, but a gentle inquiry that smuggled a lie inside a cloak of curiosity. Eve blinked, confused but not startled. This was the first time someone had questioned God's words to her. She had always taken his instructions as unquestionable truth, but the serpent's tone was disarming, almost respectful, as if he was simply seeking clarity. No, not from any tree, only from this one, the tree in the middle. The serpent's lips curved inwardly, though not enough for Eve to register it. It had not come intending to deny God's command outright. That would have triggered immediate resistance. Instead, it came to distort the command, just slightly, so Eve would be pulled away from the simplicity of obedience and into the complexity of interpretation. The enemy knows. If he can move you from "I obey" to "let me analyze why," your posture shifts from submission to negotiation. "Achem," he murmured softly, eyes fixed on the fruit as though he was studying a mystery, just this one. The serpent's voice carried subtle surprise, as if the restriction was unusual, questionable, maybe even unreasonable. The tone was crafted to make Eve feel the need to explain, to justify God's words, and once she began explaining, her focus would no longer be on obedience, but on interpretation. Eve took a slow breath and found herself speaking again, this time with more detail, more emphasis. Eve clarifying, "We can eat from all the other trees, just not from this one here." There it was, the shift. Eve was now explaining a rule she previously accepted without debate. She was mentally engaging with what she once obeyed effortlessly. The serpent had skillfully moved her into a place of reflection, analysis, and subtle self-defense. And why does that matter? Because the moment you stop resting in God's word and start wrestling with it in the presence of temptation, the advantage slips from your hand to the voice whispering against you. The serpent observed her closely. Her shoulders had relaxed. Her tone had softened. Her attention had moved from God's authority to her own interpretation. She was no longer repeating a command. She was discussing it. And discussion is fertile soil for distortion. Her mind, once anchored, was drifting, not in rebellion, but in reasoning. The serpent had not forced her to question God. He merely asked a question that made her think differently about what God said. A single seed of doubt had entered. Tiny, harmless looking, but alive. And now the serpent knew, with the first crack in her certainty, that her mind was open. Tactic 3: make God sound harsh, strict, or unreasonable. The serpent slithered in a slow, deliberate path around the tree, its movements graceful yet unsettling. It circled as if examining a great puzzle, as though the tree itself held a secret that only a thinking creature could unravel. Every motion was intentional, designed not to frighten Eve, but to provoke her curiosity and subtly shift the atmosphere. When the serpent finally spoke again, its voice was quiet, reflective, almost philosophical. Serpent pretending to reflect. So he forbade you from this one tree. Only one out of all these. The way it said "only one" carried a tone that made the command feel strangely disproportionate. The serpent was not questioning the rule, it was questioning the reasonableness of the rule. And by doing so, it invited Eve to examine something she had only accepted before. Yes, God said we must not eat it or touch it, or we will die. The serpent's eyes widened, but the shock was rehearsed, calculated like an actor performing a well-practiced role. Serpent with disbelief. Die for touching a tree. That seems severe. The tone was perfect, soft enough not to seem rebellious, yet strong enough to plant discomfort. The serpent's voice wrapped the command in the feeling of harshness, and feelings can distort truth faster than arguments. Eve shifted her weight, a small gesture, but it revealed an internal tension she hadn't felt moments before. No one had ever reacted to God's command that way. She had never seen the rule through the lens of severity. But the serpent's reaction made her wonder if the rule was heavier than she realized. This was the serpent's real strategy, not to challenge God's words, but to charge them emotionally. He was planting a dangerous interpretation. God is too strict. God's rules are heavier than they need to be. Maybe God is withholding something from you. He never said these words directly. He didn't need to. His tone said everything without saying anything. It is unusual, isn't it? Such a beautiful tree, yet forbidden. The serpent's voice softened, almost grieving the supposed injustice. Why would he hold back something so pleasing? There it was, not a question about the rule, but about God's character. Subtle, poisonous, effective. He wasn't merely asking, why the fruit was off limits. He was implying that God's intentions might not align with Eve's good. It was the oldest lie hidden in the softest tone. Maybe God is restricting you, not protecting you. Eve swallowed. The fruit had always been just a fruit, a boundary, a reminder of God's authority. She had never questioned it. She had never even paused to consider the why behind the command. The instruction was simple, and her trust in God was pure. But now, the serpent's words introduced a new lens. A lens that made restriction feel like deprivation. A lens that made obedience feel like limitation. A lens that made God's command feel like a barrier instead of a covering. Eve's eyes drifted slowly back to the tree. For the first time, she saw it not with innocence, but with mixed feeling. A stir of curiosity. A trace of confusion. A faint suggestion of unfairness. She didn't speak. She didn't move. But her silence said everything. A seed had been planted. Not on her tongue. Not in her hands. But in her heart. And seeds, even small ones, always grow. Tactic 4. Target the area of least clarity. Adam had received the command directly from the mouth of God. The words were precise, carved into his mind with the weight of divine authority. You shall not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Eve, however, had heard the command through Adam. It was true, accurate, and faithfully passed on, yet it had reached her one step removed, not weaker, but different. And the serpent, more subtle than any creature in the garden, recognized the difference instantly. Slithering with soft caution, he approached not with threats, but curiosity. Tell me, woman, was it God himself who spoke these words to you, or did they come to you through another? His tone carried no accusation, no open challenge. It was merely a question, simple, almost innocent. Eve hesitated only a moment. It was Adam who spoke them, but God spoke to him. The command is from the Lord, I know it is. At her answer, the serpent hid a smile, faint and veiled beneath calm eyes. She was confident, yes, yet her confidence stood on a relay, a message faithfully carried but not personally heard. For most commands, this made no difference. Yet the serpent sought the smallest opening, the thinnest seam in certainty, and here he found it. He did not need to deny God's authority. He did not even need to question the truth of the command. All he needed was a shadow, not enough to frighten her, but enough to make her lean forward, to wonder, to imagine. I see, and you trust Adam surely. Yet sometimes, when words pass from one to another, a detail may soften, or sharpen, or change ever so slightly. Not by intent, of course, simply by the nature of passing from ear to ear, don't you think? Eve drew a slow breath. His statement wasn't an accusation, merely an observation about how communication works, and it was reasonable. She had no reason to doubt Adam, yet the idea lingered in the air like a seed waiting for soil. The serpent felt the subtle shift. He had not attacked God's word. He had only introduced the possibility that perhaps she didn't know every nuance of it. A possibility that, once noticed, could not be unseen. He moved no closer, spoke no louder. He simply allowed the question to echo, to stretch, to expand, until it reached the one thin place between what she had heard and what she imagined God might have meant. The serpent needed no force. He needed only a gap, a small space where certainty thinned. If he could stir uncertainty there, Eve would supply the rest herself, shaping possibilities from silence, conjecture from curiosity. And in that fragile space, the serpent prepared his next move. Tactic 5. Use her own words against her. Eve stepped a little nearer to the serpent, the soft earth of the garden warm beneath her feet. The fruit hung before her in its quiet brilliance, no sound, no threat, no sign of danger. She studied its surface, the way light caught along its skin, the way it appeared as harmless as any other fruit she had ever touched. He said that if we eat it or touch it, we will surely die. The words slipped out almost automatically, a repetition of what she had always known. Yet even as she spoke them aloud, something felt slightly unfamiliar, as if she were hearing the phrasing for the first time. The serpent's eyes narrowed with playful interest, not hostile, not aggressive, merely curious in a way that seemed almost comforting. You said touch. Tell me, have you ever touched it and been harmed? Eve's body stiffened. Her hand, only inches from the fruit, lingered motionless. She had never touched it, not once. She had never even reached toward it. The command had seemed absolute, and Adam, wanting to protect her, had warned her to stay far from the tree. She had accepted that without question. Why test boundaries when obedience was simple? But now the serpent's question drew a line between what she knew and what she had assumed. A hairline crack formed in her certainty. Had God truly said touch? Or had Adam, out of love, out of protectiveness, added the phrase to guard her more fully? It was a small difference, but even a small difference mattered when dealing with the command of God. The serpent watched her face shift, watched the mixture of memory and doubt flicker through her eyes. A well-crafted question does not push. It invites the listener to lean toward uncertainty of their own will. So touching it does not kill. You do not fall, you do not wither, you do not breathe your last. Perhaps the rest of the instruction also changed in translation. His voice softened with sympathetic understanding, as though he stood with her against confusion rather than causing it. Eve frowned, her brow tightening. She tried to recall Adam's exact words, his tone, the urgency with which he had spoken. She remembered his love, his desire to keep her safe, but she could not recall whether God's original command, the one given before she existed, had included the warning about touching. Had she filled in the detail herself? Had Adam added it? Had she ever truly questioned it before? The serpent had taken nothing from her. He had introduced no new doctrine, no new fact. Instead, he used her own statement, her own understanding, as a blade turned back upon itself. Manipulators craft no new information. They distort what is already present, reshaping it until the hearer questions their own memory. Eve inhaled slowly. Eve softly, uncertain. I suppose I never tested it. And in that quiet confession, the serpent found the foothold he needed. The serpent's posture changed almost imperceptibly. His voice, once casual and questioning, softened into something smoother, warmer, a tone that felt less like a challenge and more like an invitation. The subtle shift was deliberate, crafted with precision. No longer merely curious. Now intimate, persuasive. Serpent whispering, "Eve, you are intelligent." The words sank into her quickly, unexpectedly. No creature had ever spoken to her like this. Adam loved her, yes, but he spoke in the language of companionship, not admiration. You are observant. Eve blinked, drawn in despite herself. She was observant. She noticed patterns in the garden, rhythms in creation. She recognized beauty others passed over, yet she had never heard these qualities named aloud. You are capable of more than you know. Something in her chest tightened. Was she? She had never questioned her capability, but neither had she explored it. Everything in Eden had boundaries, peaceful, perfect boundaries, yet suddenly she wondered what lay beyond the horizon of what she already knew. She looked at the serpent, uncertainty on her face, but curiosity glowing just beneath. God knows that in the day you eat of this fruit, your eyes will be opened. His voice dipped lower, wrapping around her like a secret being entrusted. You will understand mysteries. You will perceive what others overlook. You will see beneath the surface of things. Eve's heartbeat quickened. The possibility felt vast, broad, as the sky stretched over Eden, deep as the rivers flowing through it. Sight beyond sight. Understanding beyond instruction. You will be like God. The words were whispered, yet inside her, they sounded like thunder rolling across her soul. This was no longer about appetite, no longer about the fruit itself, no longer even about the command. This temptation reached deeper into the core of identity. Eve, made in God's image, was wired to grow, to learn, to expand, to cultivate the world placed in her care. Desire for growth was not sin, it was part of her design. But the serpent twisted that design, turning her strength into a vulnerability. The promise of becoming more, not by walking with God, but by reaching past Him, struck at the very heart of her being. He had found the deepest chord within her. The longing to rise, to understand, to transcend limitation. Eve's voice came out barely audible. Eve's soft, wondering. To be like God. The serpent leaned closer, his whisper gentle, almost compassionate. To rise above limits you did not choose. To discover potential no one told you you possess. To step into a greatness waiting within you. He let the words settle, like seeds cast into soil, ready to receive them. And Eve felt the pull, not toward rebellion, but toward possibility, toward the version of herself the serpent hinted she could become if she only reached for it. Tactic 7. Beautify the forbidden, change perception. Something subtle, almost imperceptible, shifted inside Eve's perception. The tree had stood in the garden since her first breath, unchanging, unthreatening, simply present. She had passed it countless times without pause. But now, after the serpent's whispered suggestions, it no longer appeared as a boundary. It appeared as a possibility. The fruit had not changed, but she had. And through her changed eyes, the fruit revealed a new allure. It seemed good for food, nourishing, wholesome, no different in form from what she and Adam freely ate each day. It appeared pleasant to the eyes, beautiful, radiant even, the colors richer than she remembered. And most dangerously, it seemed desirable for gaining wisdom, promising something she had never dared to imagine lacking. This, the serpent knew, was the true battlefield, not the fruit, not the command. The mind. Zero, the vision. The shift in interpretation. He had not moved her hand, he had moved her perspective. The serpent stepped aside, giving her space, letting her gaze rest fully on the tree. Look at it carefully. Is this the appearance of something harmful, or something purposeful? His tone contained no pressure, no threat. It was the voice of someone offering insight, not rebellion. and that made the temptation feel safe. Eve exhaled, slow and steady. She studied the fruit with new intensity, as though seeing it for the very first time. Eve, thoughtful, almost surprised. "It is beautiful. I have never looked at it this way before." The serpent nodded silently, satisfaction concealed but certain. He did not need to argue anymore. The battle was already turning. When the lens through which one sees the world is altered, the heart soon follows. He understood a truth humans would struggle with for generations. When perception shifts, obedience becomes negotiable. And with Eve's eyes changed, the final step no longer required persuasion, only opportunity. The moment of decision. Eve stood before the tree, the serpent now a quiet presence behind her, no longer whispering, no longer gidding. His work was done. The true struggle now unfolded within her, not in words, but in the silent war between conviction and curiosity. A deep stillness settled over the garden. Birdsong paused. Leaves stilled. The very air felt suspended, as though creation itself held its breath, watching a daughter of dust and glory wrestle with her own soul. Eve lifted her hand and touched the fruit with the tip of her fingers, tentatively, cautiously. Nothing happened. No shock. No darkness. No death. Only the familiar sensation of smooth skin beneath her palm. Her pulse quickened, her breath grew shallow. She glanced around the garden, half expecting Adam to appear, half expecting God's voice to thunder across the sky, but the garden remained still. Eve whispering to herself, Maybe Adam misunderstood. Maybe God meant something else." The thought startled her. She had never questioned Adam's understanding before, but the seed of doubt planted earlier now grew tendrils around her reach. Maybe this tree is part of what he wanted us to grow into. Maybe this was meant to teach us. Her voice was quiet but urgent, shaped by longing rather than defiance. The serpent did not speak. Manipulators understand the power of silence. Sometimes the loudest push is the one that never comes, leaving the victim to finish the argument on their own. Eve looked again at the fruit. It glowed softly in the filtered sunlight, innocent in appearance, inviting in its quiet mystery. She raised it slowly, feeling its weight, feeling the tension between what she had known and what she now imagined. A tremor ran through her, not of rebellion, not of anger, not even of doubt, but of desire.